Who was Nietzsche, and why did he become a figure that you wanted to spend so much time on in your career?
Okay, so Nietzsche was, of course, 19th century German philosopher. He was born in 1844, died in 1900, but suffered a mental physical breakdown in early 1889. So, before he was even 45 years old. So his productive life was relatively short. He did not start out aiming to be a philosopher. He started out as a scholar of classics, what they called in Germany then classical philology. He was an expert on the philosophy, literature, culture, history of ancient Greece and Rome. That was his specialty. He wrote a very technical classics dissertation. He had originally gone to university actually to be a theology student, and then after 1 year switched to classics. And as I like to say, he was the most spectacular dropout from theology in the history of the world. Since, as everyone knows, Nietzsche said God is dead, he became, of course, a mortal enemy of Christian theology and Christianity. But anyway, he began his career training to be an academic classics professor. He was extremely good at it. He received an appointment to the University of Basel in Switzerland before he'd even finished the PhD, which was unheard of. He was 25 years old. It was because he was, he had so impressed his teacher. But he very quickly lost interest with academic classics. In the late 1860s, he kind of discovered philosophy outside the ancient world. He discovered Arthur Schopenhauer, whose work was becoming very popular. The World is Will and Representation. And he discovered a man named Friedrich Nietzsche, who wrote what was a quite important book at the time called The History of Materialism, which introduced Nietzsche's sort of contemporary German materialism and naturalism, things we'll talk more about in a little bit. So his interests were already shifting. He began reading Kant very seriously. And his first publication, major publication in 1872, was a book called The Birth of Tragedy Out of the Spirit of Music. It was not a conventional work of classic scholarship. When he sent it to his former mentor, the mentor did not reply. He was kind of embarrassed by it because it was so polemical. And that kind of marked his break with the traditional academic route. Because of ill health, he retired fully in 1879. He got a disability pension awarded by the university. And he then spent the next 10 years trying to find, a healthy climate. The Italian Riviera, the French Riviera, he'd go to Sils Maria in Switzerland in the summers, which is an absolutely beautiful place. He was plagued by migraines, by nausea, by vision problems. He had terrible, terrible health. But he spent this decade writing all the books for which he's most famous. That includes Thus Spoke Zarathustra, On the Genealogy of Morality, Beyond Good and Evil, Twilight of the Idols, and so on. And he was largely ignored. By the mid-1880s, he was having to pay to publish his own books, which is kind of embarrassing. Right? The original self-publication, except he would pay an actual publisher to print 500 copies. Nobody was really reading it or responding. And then in 1888, a man named Georg Brandes, who was a Danish literary critic and public intellectual, began giving public lectures in Copenhagen on Nietzsche. And Brandes and Nietzsche corresponded, and at last there was some recognition, and then some other people started writing to him. And then in January of 1889, while he was in the city of Torino in northern Italy, he had a sort of final breakdown. There's lots of speculations about what was the cause of his illness. His father had died at the age of 35 of what they called softening of the brain, some medical category that was. There may have been a genetic component to this. It may have been syphilis, which was extremely common in 19th century Europe. In any case, he spent from January 1889 until his death in 1900, he was basically an invalid. And the irony, of course, is that in his autobiography, Ecce Homo, one of his last books, Nietzsche says some people are born posthumously, and Nietzsche was born posthumously. He becomes more and more famous throughout the 1890s. And to get a sense of how famous he became, in the year 1914, at the start of World War I, the German Kaiser purchased 250,000 copies of Thus Spoke Zarathustra and gave them to the troops. Right? So by then, he's just this cultural sensation. Everybody's interested in Nietzsche in Europe. People in the English-speaking world are starting to read him. And of course, when the Nazis came to power, they had to have their Nietzsche too. everybody had a version of Nietzsche at the time, and of course, the Nazi version prevailed because they seized power. That's a separate story. Maybe we'll talk about. Okay, that's just sort of the general biography. Now, why is Nietzsche been so interesting to me that ever since I read him on Easter Sunday in 1982, I've been reading and thinking about Nietzsche. Let's start with, he's first a great writer. It's a challenge for translators. Walter Kaufmann, the best known English translators, is particularly good at sort of capturing the style in English. Other translators aren't as good at that, but he really is a great writer. And then, he deals with, as it were, the most momentous topics. God is dead, right? What does that mean for morality, for value, for the point of life, for the justification of existence? What's the status of our moral beliefs? We act and talk as though, Judeo-Christian morality, that's just what morality is, altruism, equal worth of human beings, qua human beings, consideration for the suffering should be alleviated. And, and in a way, that's Nietzsche's starting point, because he's a scholar of classical antiquity, and he can see right away that Judeo-Christian morality is a historical idiosyncrasy, that it looks nothing like the morality of the Greek or Roman world. A good point of reference for listeners, think of the Homeric epics. You read the Homeric epics, and many people have either read them or by now seen the movies. You see right away that this is not a world of Judeo-Christian morality, right? The suffering is sort of neither here nor there. The virtues of the Homeric world are the virtues of power, of wealth, of glory, of honor, of sexual satisfaction, and triumph, right? It's the Christian world, as Nietzsche notices, a kind of inversion of this world. Right? So Nietzsche raises this question: where did our morality come from? What is the value of these values, as he often puts it? And then he locates this question, of course, in the context of the major intellectual event of the 19th century, which is that for the first time, people are openly skeptical about the existence of God. Before that, people are skeptical. Hume is discreetly skeptical, so he doesn't end up in jail. But by the 19th century, there's a consensus building among intellectuals that, of course, the idea that there's some supernatural being, overseeing the universe, giving meaning and shape to our lives is just nonsense.